should be live now. Let me just double check. This is the first time I've actually done live streaming through Riverside like this, so I should be streaming to X as well as YouTube. So let me just double check that. Okay, so it looks like it's appearing on YouTube. And let me check on X here just to make sure that it's updating. Oh yeah, there we go. All right, so I guess we'll see how this goes. So I've got a loose plan here for what we're going to do today. I don't expect it to be too long. I don't have a ton of time here, but yeah, let's do some refactoring. So I've been working on this AI chat app with for Mastering Nuxt because we're completely redoing Mastering Nuxt course from scratch, basically. So we're doing this AI chat app. So basically what we've got right now is you can start a new chat. You can type in something like, tell me a short story about a Vue developer on Monday morning. And then, it'll stream back the response. It'll update the title dynamically. We can pop open this sidebar, and currently it's not responsive, as you can see. We got a bunch of different stuff here. We can have projects, so we can group our chats. And if I close this, we can actually assign this to a different project. And now it's assigned to a project if we open up our sidebar here. So that's basic functionality there. Not a whole lot going on, but to actually make it like really nicely performant and organized and everything takes a little bit of work. So what I'd like to do is actually we're going to do some refactoring of this chat window component here, which is what you see on the side here. And basically, the way that I like to develop is first I get it to work, basically like a prototype. So the functionality is there, but the code is awful. And then from there, I refactor. I organize the code a little bit, dry it up, maybe pull out some composables, pull out some components, however I need to do that, restructure it. Then if I need to, um, add error handling, that kind of stuff, consider some more edge cases, all that kind of stuff. So that is basically my whole development process. So I just do a quick and dirty approach, and then I come back and refactor it. And how it goes. Sometimes I plan to come back and refactor it, but then I don't actually do that because I get distracted with other things, and then I don't have time for that. So that is not the case here because this is going into a course, and the whole point is that it is nicely written code. So the goal here is that I've written this code, but it's pretty terrible. So for example, down here we're using old ref style. We're not using use template refs, so we want to change that. We have our message input here, but then we also have it here so we can handle the empty state and then the non-empty state. So obviously we want to pull that into separate components. So we're going to do a couple different things here. We're going to look at this idea that I call the not quite MVC set of patterns. So how do we take this MVC pattern that we've got from general web development, model, view, controller, and apply it to our Vue applications? So there's some things that we can do there that we can do to help us sort of organize our code a little bit better. And we're gonna basically do that. And then at the end, I'm gonna go through a little bit of Clean Components Toolkit, because what I've got going on right now is if you have previously bought a course from me, excluding Mastering Nuxt, if you've bought a course from me, the stuff that I've just done on my own, then you would have received uh, a bit of a discount code last week if you wanted to pick up Clean Components Toolkit. And if you just bought Clean Components Toolkit and you didn't get a discount, you can message me if you didn't get that code, but you've purchased something, you can message me and I'll hook you up. But the reason, if the only course you bought from me is Mastering Next, I don't have access to those to that sales data because that's with Vue School. So I don't know if you've bought anything from me at that point. So uh, again, email me if you would like that code. So at the end, I'll go through a little bit about that and yeah, but let's actually get to some coding here because we've been just talking for 5 minutes. So the first thing I'd like to do is let's update this to do use template ref. So we'll do that. Use template ref here and text area ref here. Use template ref. Can maybe organize that a little better. There currently is a bug in how this button pops up. So if I get it to put out another story, like it works, or it should work. Okay, maybe that's another bug. We'll worry about that later. This whole scrolling stuff is a little bit more complicated, so I'm not going to try and debug this on stream. It's also not the point of what I'm trying to do here. So, okay, so we got that. Yes, we need to do, that's partly why it probably isn't working. So we'll call it text area and scroll. I don't need to have the types in here. So we're going to look for scroll container. I guess if I do this, it auto. The nice thing about use template ref is that we get this because it's typed properly. We get this whole autocomplete there, which is a really nice feature that we get. Oh, I got some people in the chat. Oh, okay, this is nice. Riverside actually pulls the chats in from YouTube. Oh, I can't see where people are chatting from. Yeah, Nathan's mentioning opportunities to refactor into smaller components. Yeah, so one of the things I talk about in Clean Components Toolkit is like often we'll do things like these comments where you got project assignment modal and message input form only when there are messages. And you have like these comments, message history, main chat content. Like, well, okay, if you're already doing this, you've already figured out that these are separate things. And instead of having it like this, it's pretty easy to, that's not what I wanted. It's pretty easy to just like take this and extract it out into its own component. And then you can just call this an empty state component. And in that way, you don't actually have to write comments. Your code is just self-documenting because the code itself, and if you've named your things properly, actually tell you what the code is doing. But sometimes you don't want to have everything like super like too dry, because that can also be annoying, because then you have to jump through 20 different files just to do one tiny little thing. So there's always a balance there. Yeah. Alex is mentioning Vue Vine. That's a newer thing that people are getting into, where we can create multiple components within a single file component, but we won't get into that here. There's a lot of opinions on how that works. Okay, so let's do how do I want to do this? So I want to create a composable for all of this scroll stuff. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. But instead of creating a new file, what I'm going to do is actually create an inline composable, because basically it makes it easier for us to extract or to like organize the logic first and make sure that things are still working. So let me just check that this button actually works. Okay, so the scroll to bottom is currently working, so we'll go with that for now. We'll do use scroll function use chat scroll. Naming things is always so hard, especially when you're on stream and you're trying to think about like where you're going with things. Probably most of this logic will probably fit in here. Like check scroll position. No, we don't need that there. Scroll to bottom, we can just copy into here. So we're going to return is at bottom, show scroll button, scroll to bottom. Input this. There we go. Fix that formatting there. Okay, so message input handling. Handle send message we're going to keep in the chat window. Right now it uses this on key down thing because Cursor wrote it that way instead of using an actual form component. So that's something I also want to change because that's just not great. Handle project select. So then we've got some stuff here to get the scrolling to work. So we'll move that into this as well. So far I'm just like moving some code around. And okay, so we've moved some code around. We've got a bunch of different stuff going on in this little function that we've created here, use chat scroll. And basically this lets us organize things as like a very first minor step. And we can see already that we have some errors here because we're not returning this text area ref. We need to get that somehow. So we can return it from this function, but then we actually need to use the function. And so is at bottom is not even used. So we probably don't need to export that. So we'll save that. We did a bunch of work here. So let's actually double check that this continues to work. And of course it does not. Scroll container is not defined in chat window dot view. Okay, so scroll container is not defined. Where is it trying to access? Ah, okay. Nope, that's in the right spot there. So this should be referenced there. Are we referencing this outside of our thing here? No, we're not. So it looks like we're trying to call scroll to bottom and then scroll container is not defined. Let me just give it a refresh. We'll see. So yes, we're in stack trace. That is true. So now we have lost our actual scroll button. So now we have a separate bug that we have to look at. So check scroll position. If I go here, why didn't it jump down to the right spot? There we go. Okay. So we've got our scroll container here. And if we get the values, so our scroll top, so it's getting all the values. Scroll height minus 200 is 1726. So it should be set to true after this. If my math is right. Show scroll button is false because it thinks we're at the bottom. Okay. Now it's showing. And it's working. So I don't know what that was about. If I refresh, there must be some sort of like reactivity thing because when I do like a hot module reload, then it all of a sudden works. These are my least favorite kinds of bugs because they're very hard to debug. So we'll see how this goes. Okay, so let me just think for a second. If the hot module reloading makes it work, then it is probably some sort of like on mount thing where the scroll container it's not getting watched correctly or something like that. Because once I can actually click on it, then it works fine. It doesn't actually update. It doesn't that the button should disappear once I hit the bottom here. So for whatever reason, this is not getting updated correctly. Yeah, so okay, so the event handler is triggering as it should. Do a quick little console log there to check that. And then, so that is what sets it. Okay, so this logic is working correctly. It's just not updating the actual button for whatever reason. So we can see that when I scroll the console logs here. You know, the debugger is great, but sometimes the console log just kind of helps when you're doing like interactive stuff because it takes too long to like step through the code one line at a time, I find. Okay, so we've got the button here. So that's show scroll button. The is at bottom should just be this. I don't know why. Show scroll button to value. True. False. Okay, so it doesn't like to get rid of it for some reason. Show scroll button. a scroll button. We pull it out of there, and then we have this v show. I wonder if there's maybe some styling that like does something weird with it. Yeah, okay. So it works now. So there's maybe some sort of like weird because the v show just it toggles the display property in the CSS, and so I'm wondering if I maybe have some styles somewhere that set the this button is, or I'm using Next UI, so maybe Next UI styles are taking precedence over that. I don't know. Either way, that works now. So that's great. Okay. Moving on to uh okay, great. So it shows up and we can click and it scrolls down. All right. So we have extracted that bit out. So now see that like whole debugging process is a little bit easier when we're working in the same file instead of jumping back and forth between two files. You may prefer to just split it out. So I'm going to do call this use scroll container. I think that's what I called it. Use chat scroll. That is not what I called it. Okay. Use chat scroll. We'll keep that the same, and we will just pull this out. We paste it in here, then we have to do an export. Okay. And then if we save this, then we get a bunch of stuff that we have as inputs that needed to be put in. So now we have, let's see, messages and streaming message dot value. So we could either pass these values in to this chat scroll composable. We could keep this watch in our component and then call a method here to update it. Force so this is basically what this is doing is when new messages come in, it's going to just like force, instead of calling the scroll to bottom thing, we can just set the scroll top directly. And so we don't do any like fancy scrolling animation or anything. It just, so while the stream is happening, it just like basically pins the window to the bottom. That's what this does. So yeah. I might just export a method. We'll take this method and we'll call it like pin to bottom. And we don't need that. And then here we'll take this. We'll export pinned bottom. Got a whole bunch of errors here. Do a watch. For whatever reason, I like doing my watch at the end. And some formatting there. This is all messed up because of formatting. I don't know what I did here. There we go. I knew there were some weird bracket things going on. Okay. So then I do that. And if I have it at the bottom, we'll get rid of this sidebar. And I get it to stream. It should keep it pinned at the bottom there like that. Perfect. Okay. So that was, we did some refactoring. We pulled out this whole composable here from this and made it a little bit simpler. We have some imports that we don't need, mostly because this is Next, and we get those auto imports, so that's nice. All right, so that's the first step. And of course, this is taking longer than I expected it to, but we're gonna keep going and see where else we can get. So the other thing I wanted to do is show you this not quite MVC set of patterns. So as I was explaining earlier, uh, we have model view controller pattern when it comes to web apps or iOS apps, or I mean, any type of application has this. We've got the model, which is like your data and all of the methods that act on the data. Then you've got the view, which is the UI, and then we have the controller that sits in the middle that connects the two. And we like to separate these two domains. It's kind of like separating the front end from your back end, because you've got um, like each view could have multiple models that it's using, and each model might be used in multiple different views. So we don't need to couple these things. We can keep them separate. And um, so there's many different ways of like slicing it in this format. And you might think of it as the model as the database, the API is your controller, and the view part as the actual front end of your application. You can also apply this in a way to the Vue application itself that just runs in the front end. The model is the composables. So this chat scroll, this that takes this logic and uh, does something with it. Although this isn't working with data in the same sense. But then we also have uh, the view part becomes what I call humble components, which are just like the very most basic components. They might also be referred to as presentational components or dumb components or anything like that. And these components, all they are is they take in props and they emit events. They don't do anything like this component. We have like this data store kind of component that grabs data from this use chat composable. It does stuff with it updates the head tags by using this use head. It does a whole bunch of different stuff in here. It's like got its fingers kind of in a whole bunch of different stuff, which is not the greatest from an architectural standpoint because it's coupled to so many different parts of our application. But if we can, for example, if we have like this typewriter text component, which has a couple errors in it, there's just some type errors. But what this component does is it just takes in this prop, which is text, and all it does is this little typewriter animation. So when you add a new, when you start your chat, it like animates this thing in. So if I say, tell me a joke about Next developers, then it animates in like that. And this component is so straightforward and easy, and we don't have to do anything. We've just got a little bit of CSS, we got a watch, we got a little animate method, and that's all that it is. And that is what we would like to have most of our components in our application be, because this is so simple to work with, so simple to test, to write, to deal with, and we don't have to have a whole bunch of different concerns coming in. So the way that then the last piece is the controller portion, which is another component that basically we've got this, we've got mostly these humble components throughout our application. Then we've got our composables, which have the data and the business logic and everything like that. But then to actually connect those two, we've got other components that are basically just taking in composables and components and then like moving data around effectively. So I want to do a little bit of refactoring on this one, and then we'll end with a little bit of a Q&A sort of thing with Clean Components Toolkit, which if you haven't figured it out already, these patterns are in the Clean Components Toolkit. So if you want to learn more about them, they are in there. But I don't want to make this too much of a sales pitch. So let's just keep going with some refactoring, get some things done. So we've got this component, this message input form, and I want to make this a separate component. So the question is, I've got the input here, and I think it's exactly the same here as this input. The only difference is that the one has a scroll to bottom thing on it. Okay, so we'll take this, we'll actually make this into its own component. We'll call it chat input, because that seems like a good name for this. So we'll do that, paste that in here. Trying to break my habit and put the script at the top and the template at the bottom, because apparently that's what everyone likes. And so I'll succumb to the peer pressure. And so now, okay, stop it. Cursor wants me to add in all this other stuff, but we're actually going to do a bunch of props for this. So what do we need? We need send message, which will just be that. New message we'll keep as we'll do a ref here. That's not how we do this. There we go. And then we'll send that up when we do send message. We want to do hyphenated there. And then on key down, handle send message. We're not going to do that because we're going to actually change this to a form. And we'll do this way. Change this to a submit type. So then now we should be able to just hit enter. Automatically it'll handle it for us. This is the better way of doing it than a key down handler or whatever was in there before. So we have vModel, new message. I think this is just giving me a weird error because it needs to be reloaded. Adjust text area height. We need I think we can get that from in here. And it looks like we did handle send message. Yeah, we want to send the message, then we need to reset and and then adjust the text area again. So we've got some logic in here that basically what happens is um, that the text box here, so if I type a whole bunch in the text box here, we want it to expand. Yeah, and now it's broken because it's not hooked up correctly. But if I go to ChatGPT, we can see that it's as we go, it expands nicely and does that in a good way. And we want to do the same thing here. But for like scroller reasons and things like that, it needs to have this in here. I actually can't remember why. I pulled this code from a previous project and it worked there, so I'm continuing on with that. There might be a way that I could just deal with have it change height based on like the default browser implementation, because the text area will do that. So yeah, we'll do trim. Why is this? Okay. Have props is streaming, handle send message. Okay, we can get rid of that. And then I want to put my define emits at the top. Oh, because I put this as I typed it wrong. That's why. There we go. So I fixed the types there. Now we can emit. We reset this. Then we go here and we need access to this text area ref. So this is where it gets interesting because we've got this chat scroll thing going on where we have to use uh, this text area ref in this chat input component. But we also have this chat scroll, which wants to access this text area ref. So it should be fine. If we call this use template ref multiple times, it should give us back the same reference. That's what I would expect. I actually don't know. I haven't tried that with uh, with use template ref. If we call it in multiple places, will it pull this from the same ref in the DOM? I would expect it to do that. Guess we'll find out. So send a message. Okay, so it sent. I don't have the chat input actually hooked up. I don't even have this component in here actually. So this is the empty state. Handle send message. Do 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 do. That's good for now. So let's go to the empty state. And the styling is all messed up because I did not copy over that styling. Message form wrapper, message input. So the reason I'm using styles here like this as well is because I've found, and I've gotten lots of feedback from people, that having tailwind styles in the template can be really distracting. So I try and avoid doing that. This has, I mean, a little bit here and there is fine, I think. But if you use actual like tailwind, like this much of styling with tailwind, it gets to be like a lot of utility classes. And then that's really hard for someone trying to learn what's going on in the template and try and parse through that. So, okay, so the styles are fixed. Oh, yes. Um, if I hit enter, then it makes it, the text area takes over. Interesting. Maybe that's why I had the key handler on there. Okay. I wonder if there's a way to disable the text area from doing that. I could just do this as well. Okay. So sending message works great. The empty state, now we have, if I scroll all the way to the top here, the empty state, we have our message input in here. And I haven't set up any sort of like code formatting in this project, but I really should. So we've got our empty state now on the chat input. Now we need to update the chat for this bottom one here for when the chat has messages. So you can get rid of that chat input, add that in, and there we go. Okay, so that works. We don't have to do any extra stuff there. And if we do the height adjusting, it seems to be working. I accidentally pasted in all of that. I didn't realize that I had all of that in there. Okay, so if I do this, tell me a story, so I get a longer output from it, so I can test the scrolling again. Okay, so if I go scroll up, this scroll button appears. Then if I paste in a bunch of text, then it resizes nicely for us. Perfect. Okay, so that's nicely done. So essentially, we would go through this whole thing in this way. We'd create humble components like this chat input. If we look at this, now this component can be used anywhere in our app quite easily. And we saw this already. I got it working in our empty state up here, and I was able to just put it in at the bottom here. And if we needed to use this chat input anywhere else in our app, it would be fairly easy to do so because all it expects is this prop is streaming and a send message thing, and that's all that it does. It's a fancy text input, so it doesn't need a whole lot. and it's like fully self-contained. It has use template ref, does all that kind of stuff for us. So what that enables us is to just, it's decoupled. So we can move it around wherever we need. And if we go through our entire component here, we do that for everything. We've already got the assign project modal is like that. We could go through and um, I'd probably keep this in this component here because this scroll button, scroll to bottom, is pretty specific to this chat window. It's not really like a reusable piece. But then we've also got like, to actually render each message, we've got a markdown renderer component, which is a fully self-contained thing. All it does is it takes in the content that we need and parses it out. But we could take our whole message history component and we could pull that out and then pull out the chat header as a separate component. Like we can break this down and then eventually get to a point where all we're doing is having like some VIFs, VElse ifs on like a list of components. And right, so it's like loading state with a bunch of props, then um, message history with a bunch of props, and like we just keep going like this, passing in the data that we need. This is a pretty good example, actually. It got the gist of what I was trying to show you here. And so you end up with a controller component that basically just takes other components, takes composables, combines them together. And it's a really nice way to organize stuff. And so your data flow comes in through the controller component. This chat input doesn't get data specifically from anything. And so if we go down to our actual script block here, it would be the same thing. We would have the use head because this is going to update the. I can get rid of that. The use head would update the meta tags. We would have use chat scroll to get that logic. We'd get use chat to get the actual chat stuff, to be able to send a message, to get all that other stuff. Then we'd import all of these different components and have maybe a little bit of styling, maybe a simple watch, and that's it. It basically just is glue code between all of the different things that we've already built. So that is the refactoring that I'll do for today. I'm going to stop there and just share a little bit about Clean Components Toolkit with the last few minutes that I've got here. So let me, I'll load the landing page here. Might as well. So if you have purchased something from me in the past, maybe you've already got Clean Components Toolkit and you're just enjoying the stream, you should have gotten an email last week about discount code. If you didn't, you can message me about that. And what we're gonna, what this does, what this is we have a whole list of patterns. So we covered inline composables, and each pattern has this in-depth guide to what is an inline composable, why do we want to use it, what is the point. Then we've got refactoring examples. So I showed you on the stream a little bit of a refactoring example. These are full examples using like real apps. So this one, I built a chat app, basic little chat app that you can do to demonstrate this in a bit more of a focused setting so that it's easier to understand. This example I've been sharing today was, there's a lot of code going on. There's a lot of other stuff that in the app that it's hard for me to actually communicate, and so then it becomes harder to understand once you get beyond a couple hundred lines of code. So these examples are all, a few hundred lines of code, so they're not toy examples anymore, but they are a little bit more complicated so we can see the value a bit more. And then we go through these refactoring steps. I've got this UI where you can see all of your code. This is where we start out with this app. And yeah, you can see that the thing before I was mentioning about Tailwind styles. That's one thing I want to do is update this content here to basically remove all the styles from here, because all of these classes are not really that useful in understanding this inline composables pattern. So we go through this whole thing, and we can see step 1, we're going to add in some state, add in this use messages composable. Step 3, we do these things. So it's got this diff view, and we can go through to all of your different steps. At the end, you got a little quiz that you can go through, and you can see if you got any of them right or not. And then I finished it off. Every single pattern in Clean Components Toolkit is finished off with this video that's basically like me, I don't know, basically like if I did a live stream on this pattern for like 10, 15 minutes, that's basically what you get. So it's sort of like pretty raw off the top of my head. And that gives me, it's interesting because the other content is very like edited and focused, and I thought a lot about it. And I think that's where most of the value is. But with these videos, I just sort of talked about the pattern and what I liked about them and some other things. And I feel like I approach it and I talk about it in a very different way because of that. And so a lot of people have mentioned that they really like these videos as well, because they sort of add a nice little cap onto it. So they go through the quiz results and why each of the answers to the quizzes are what they are. And yeah, so you get a little bit of a different perspective because of the way that the content was created. And then a little summary at the end so that you can, if you want to come back and refresh your memory, all that kind of stuff, you can come here and do that. So this has a ton of different patterns in it. I think there are 21 of them. If I go down here, yeah, 21 different tools that you can look at and learn from. There's ones on passing state between components. How do we do that well? Where do we put state in our components? So like, how do we pass data around our application is a big one. How do we manage state inline composables? I showed you. Some other things about extracting components. How do we deal with it? How do we deal with long components? What do we do there? Then some of the stuff that I shared today, which I've actually never shared with anyone publicly outside of a workshop that I did and this course, the not quite MVC stuff. We looked at extracting a composable. We did that today. We created some humble components today as well, and some controller components. So I think it's worth it to go into here to see. Yeah, so this is a pretty simple toy example of a controller component, which I was trying to illustrate before, but here's another example of it. So you can see we've got two components, task input, task list, and all that we're doing. So this is like, if we've got like a to-do app, let's say, right? You've got your input where you can add a task, then you've got the list of those tasks. And these two components on their own are very simple. They're pretty trivial, easy to test, easy to write, very focused. And then you've got your controller, which is this composable that has the list of tasks. You can add and remove tasks. And then this controller component here is just the glue that combines these two together. Maybe you add a little bit of styling on this, and that's basically it. So that's just another example of a controller component. So yeah, there's a lot of different stuff in here. Where else were we? Yeah, layers of abstraction, thin composables, lightweight state management, component boundaries, insider trading. And then I have a bunch of different bonus videos at the end. Every once in a while I add some bonus videos as I think of them, and just sort of like just different ideas around component patterns and stuff like that. And one of them was how I find new tools, how I think about these things, and how I uh, like where did these ideas come from. I think that's kind of useful because then um, you can figure some of these things out for yourself if you have the desire to do that. So if you yeah, that's about Clean Components Toolkit. And if you're interested in that, you can get it. If not, then you don't have to get it. And hopefully I'll be able to do some more live streams in the future. And yeah, let me know what you liked about this stream, what you didn't like about this stream, how I can improve it. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.